I'll give you a question and I want you to answer these questions like a multiple choice. Okay, the first question is here. So tell us about yourself. What is your current status? Are you a medical student, intern, a postgraduate, practicing physician, or a cardiologist?
So you can just click on the status and we'll get the results straight away. So it will
Right.
give us an idea to the speakers and the panelists, the sort of audience we're addressing to.
Okay, so the polling is going on, and I can see most of these people are medical students. About 88, 89% of them are medical students.
Excellent, very good.
About 5 of them are interns or fresh MBBS. 2 of them are postgraduates, and 3 of them are practicing physicians. So this is what I could see. Now, before I proceed further, I would just post a couple of ECGs, and I want you to answer those ECGs so we get a fair idea of what is what knowledge you have already. Okay, we're coming.
Share your screen.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen now. Yeah, so welcome everybody. I've divided this talk into 2 topics. I thought one lecture will not give justice to the entire part of ECG. So I've tried to keep it in 2 topics. Now, this is my first question to the audience. Calculate the rate here. I hope you can see the screen.
Not yet.
Okay, I'm going to launch the poll. Can you see the screen?
Dr. Aziz, share your screen, please.
Yes. Can you see the screen? No?
No.
Okay. All right. Here.
Good, excellent.
And I want you to calculate the ventricular rate in this. Yes, okay. So people have started answering. That's good. Okay. I'll share the results of this later. And we'll come to the next question. Yeah. I hope you can see this screen. And I want you to identify the rhythm. Very few people seem to be attempting this, but yes, the numbers are increasing. I just want to get a fair idea of what knowledge you already have, so it
It's
becomes
okay.
easier.
Not many people are trying to be brave about it. We can always come back at the end of your talk.
Yes.
Let's move on.
All right. So I will share these results later. Okay. All right, so today's webinar, we will talk about the ECG physiology, uses and indications of ECG, the calibration of the ECG, what are the components of the ECG, and how to read the ECG. And how to read the ECG, we shall be covering the rate and rhythm disorders now. A lot of the other things like ischemia, infarction, bundle branch blocks, fascicular blocks, electrolyte disturbances, we will try to cover it in another session. Now, ECG or the electrocardiograph is a graphic representation of the electrical activity of the heart. In the good old days, they used to actually dip the limbs in electrolyte solutions to be able to record the ECG. Nowadays, it is very, very simple, and we have just smaller devices, very, very small and accurate devices to record the ECG. Now, why do you want to record an ECG? You want to record the ECG to assess a patient's heart rhythm. You suspect the patient's heart rate or rhythm is going too high, too low, it's abnormal. You want to record, you want to see what is happening to the heart rhythm. If you're suspecting any ischemia or infarction, patient comes to you with chest pain, you want to know whether the patient is having a heart attack or is it stable coronary artery disease. You want to diagnose abnormalities of the heart, such as chamber enlargement. A patient with hypertension or aortic stenosis, does he have left ventricular hypertrophy? Or does he have any other abnormalities? Are there any abnormal electrical conduction like AV blocks? To diagnose electrolyte disturbances like hyperkalemia, hypokalemia, then certain congenital syndromes like the long QT syndromes, the short QT syndromes in patients present with palpitations or syncope. These are some of the broad uses of ECG that are very, very commonly used. Now, coming to the electrical system of the heart per se. So, if you have read your physiology well, you would know that the ECG, the electrical activity of the heart, starts from the SA node. So, the SA node is located on the top of the right atrium. And from the SA node, the electricity, the electrical impulses go down to the AV node via these internodal tracks. There are 3 internodal tracks through which it goes down to the AV node. From the AV node, it goes down to the bundle of His, and the bundle of His divides into a right bundle and a left bundle. The left bundle further divides into 2 fascicles, the left anterior fascicle and the posterior fascicle. And these fascicles divide into further septal fibers and then Purkinje fibers. This is the normal electrical system of the heart. So from the SA node to the AV node, to the bundle of His, then to the fascicles, then to the septal fibers, to the Purkinje fibers. Any abnormality in anywhere of the system can cause abnormal rhythms. So the SA node is a predominant pacemaker of the heart. See, all the cardiac cells are capable of generating impulses, but the speed at which they generate these impulses, also known as atomicity, differs. So the SA node is capable of generating impulses at a rate of about 60 to 100, or sometimes even more than that. AV node is capable of generating impulses about 40 to 60, and the ventricular muscles themselves, they are capable of generating impulses at the rate of about 20 to 40. So because of the higher rate and the higher automaticity, the SA node takes over the function of the pacemaker. But when the SA node is diseased, or when there's a block in the AV node or in the bundle, the ventricular impulses may become more prominent. What is the physiology behind the ECG? We are talking about electricity. So what exactly is the electrical activity going on inside the muscle cells, the cardiac muscle cells? So the cardiac muscle cells, they have sodium and potassium. All right, they are in a polarized state always. And when the depolarization occurs, so there is an exchange of sodium and potassium. So what happens, the negative stage, the from minus 90, there's an opening of the fast sodium channels, and there's an influx of sodium into the cells. And this causes the current of the electricity to become rapidly positive. And in this phase 1, the sodium channels close, and then it causes a plateau. And in the part of the second phase 2, the calcium channels open and there's a calcium influx. And then in phase 3, there is a potassium channel opening and potassium efflux and calcium channels closed. And then in phase 4, the potassium channels remain closed, and then it comes back to the original state. So this action potential is what is actually causing the electrical activity inside the cell. And this is what we're trying to record with the ECG. Now, when we start reading the ECG, we should know what is the calibration of the ECG. There are two things that you will see on the ECG. One is a y-axis and an x-axis. On the y-axis is the height of the ECG. There is a calibration factor like this. I will show you in further ECGs, which will be seen. So this calibration indicates the height. So here there are about 10 small boxes. These 10 small boxes and one column is covered here. So this indicates this is a standard ECG with the calibration factor being 1 millimeter is equal to 0.1 millivolt. Now the ECG paper itself has small boxes and big boxes, if you have seen these. So the small boxes here, they are 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter. And the big boxes are 5 millimeters by 5 millimeters. So on the height, 1 millimeter is equal to 0.1 millivolt, which is one small box is equal to 0.1 millivolt, one big box is equal to 0.5 millivolt. And the usual speed with which we take the ECG is 25 millimeter per second. This is the standard speed, but then yes, speed can be altered. Speeds of 12.5 or even 50 can be taken depending on circumstances. Now on the x-axis, the 1 millimeter is equal to 0.04 seconds. So one small box, this small box on the ECG is equal to 0.04 seconds, and one big box, which is about 5 small boxes, is equal to 0.2 seconds. So these things help us in calculating the ventricular or atrial rates, in calculating the voltages of the QRS complexes. And so we should always be looking at these calibration factors. These are written on the ECG. If I can show you the previous ECGs. Yeah, so here you will see there is a speed written 25 millimeter per second here. And the voltage calibration is also mentioned here. Limb leads 10 mm per millivolt and chest leads 10 mm per millivolt. So you have to look at this ECG, these factors, so that you understand what is the calibration of the ECG. Sometimes if the patient has left ventricular hypertrophy with huge voltage complexes, we might reduce the chest voltage to 5 mm per millivolt. And if you want to see if the P waves or the PR intervals are not very clear on the ECG, we increase the speed of the ECG to 50 mm per second. So yeah, so then coming to what are the components of the ECG. So the various components of the ECG are the P waves, the PR segment, the QRS, the ST segment, and the T wave. Now P wave indicates atrial depolarization. Once the impulse travels from the SA node, it doesn't just go to the AV node, it also travels to the atria, the right atrium and the left atrium, and it causes depolarization of these atria. So this is what produces the P wave. The normal width of the P wave and the height of the P wave should not exceed 2.5 millimeters. And then the P wave is followed by a PR segment. This PR segment is what we call as an isoelectric segment. Isoelectric in the sense there is no electrical activity in this period. So the previous segment before the P, also called as the TP segment, the PR segment, and the ST segment, all of these should be on the same line. So this is known as isoelectric. These are the isoelectric segments. If the line changes, then they are abnormal. Then the QRS depicts the depolarization of the ventricles themselves. So the Q indicates usually of the septal part of the ventricle, and R is the RS is the rapid depolarization of the rest of the ventricle. Then there is an ST segment. Now this also should be isoelectric. If you see this segment going up, it's called ST elevation. That would indicate is myocardial infarction. If it goes down, it indicates ST depression or myocardial ischemia. Now the T wave represents a repolarization of the ventricles. So once the ventricles are depolarized, after some time they get repolarized. So this repolarization is represented by the T waves. Mind you, we spoke about atrial depolarization. We did not speak about atrial repolarization. The atrial repolarization usually gets superimposed on the QRS and it is not visible on the ECG. And there are various intervals that we need to know. So first one is the PR interval. Now PR segment is different from PR interval. A PR segment is the isoelectric segment between the end of the P wave and the beginning of the QRS complex. This is the PR segment. Whereas the PR interval measures the time. So the time from the beginning of the P wave to the beginning of the QRS. This is known as a PR interval. Then you have the QT interval. The QT interval is from the beginning of the QRS to the end of the T wave. So these are the various components of the ECG that one should be aware of. So the P wave, again representing atrial repolarization, duration less than 0.12 seconds, height less than 2.5 millimeter. The shape of the P wave should be smooth. We will come to this later. And the orientation, it's usually positive in leads 2, 3, and AVF, which are the negative, which are the inferior limb leads, and it is negative in AVR. Now, PR interval, the PR interval from the beginning of the P wave to the beginning of the QRS represents atrial depolarization. And it actually represents, it's a combination of the atrial depolarization plus delay at the AV node. So if the AV node is diseased, or if the patient is on medicines that cause a block in the AV node, so the PR interval will prolong. The normal PR interval is 0.12 to 0.2 seconds, which if you go by the small boxes will be about 3 to 5 small boxes. And if it is prolonged, it indicates a conduction block. A shortened PR interval indicates accelerated conduction or other problems. The QRS complex is ventricular depolarization itself. The duration of the ventricular complex is 0.06 to 0.11 seconds. If it is 0.12 or more, it indicates it's a wide QRS. Now, the Q wave is the first negative deflection. The first negative deflection that you see is a Q wave. Q waves are normally seen in L1, AVL, sometimes in V5, V6. But if in other leads, the Q waves may be abnormal or pathological. There are criteria to define pathological Q waves, which will come to in later segments. R wave is the first positive deflection, and S wave is the first negative deflection after the R wave. Now coming to the ST segment is the interval between the ventricular depolarization and the repolarization. So QRS is the depolarization, T wave is the repolarization. So the period between depolarization and repolarization is the ST segment. This should be ideally isoelectric. And if there is any ischemia or infarction, this can change. Now, coming to the limb leads, now there are 3 standard limb leads, L1, L2, L3. Now the ECG lead electrodes themselves are placed on the right arm, the left foot. And there is a neutral electrode on the right foot. So in the case of the lead 1, so the electricity is traveling from the right arm towards the left arm. So this is the axis of the lead 1, which conventionally is called 0 degrees. Now lead 2, there's electrical activity from the right arm to the left leg. So the axis of this lead 2 is about 60 degrees, and lead 3 is from the left arm to the left foot. And the axis of this would be about 120 degrees. Now, other than these 3 limb leads, you have augmented limb leads. So you have the AVR, AVL, and AVF. Now, what are these limb leads? Now, what happens is, now supposing AVR, now AVR is, now there's a lead on the right hand, there's a lead on the left hand and in the left foot. So the combined electrical activity from the left foot to the right arm, and from the left leg to the right arm, going towards the right arm, this is represented as AVR. The axis of this is minus 120 degrees. Now the combined electrical activity from the right arm towards the right foot, from the left arm towards the left foot, these is combined as a AVF, and the electrical axis is 90 degrees. AVL similarly, it is from AVR to from the right arm to the left arm and foot to the left leg. And this is usually minus 30 degrees. Now coming to the precordial leads, the placement of the precordial leads is also very, very important, because a lot of changes can happen if the leads are not properly placed. Now to identify where to place the leads, you should know the angle of Louis, which is the mandibulosternal angle. And sorry about this. Yeah. So the intercostal space just below the angle of Louis is the second intercostal space, and below that is the third intercostal space, below that is the fourth, then the fifth intercostal spaces. Now V1 is placed on the right side of the sternum, in the fourth intercostal space, the V2 is placed on on the left side, just immediate to the left sternum. V4 is placed at the apex. The apex is normally in the fifth intercostal space, cutting the mid-clavicular line. And V3 is placed in between V2 and V4. Now V5 and V6, these are all placed in the fifth intercostal space only. They don't go down. So it is like this: V1, V2, then V3, V4 like this, and V4, V5, V6, they all come in the fifth intercostal space. V4 is in the mid-clavicular line, V6 is in the mid-axillary line, and V5 is placed between these two. Sometimes V7, V8, V9 are recorded. These are the posterior leads, and these are recorded in the back, the interscapular, in the interscapular region. So the line cutting the tip of the scapula would be V9, and V7, V8 would be put in between those two lines. Now there are right-sided leads sometimes we record, particularly in case of inferior wall MI, when we are suspecting a right ventricular myocardial infarction. So we placed these leads, instead of on the left side, we placed these leads on the right side. These are called as right-sided chest leads. Now, the orientation of the leads is such that from the leads we get to know what part of the ventricle or the heart is being affected. Now, if you see changes in V1 and V2, they usually indicates that the interventricular septum is involved, calling septal ischemia or septal infarction if you see changes in these leads. Now, V3, V4, they called the anterior leads, and V5, V6, they represent the lateral part of the heart. Now, this is the hexaxial system. So in the hexaxial system, lead 1 would be 0 degrees, lead 2 would be 60 degrees, lead 3 would be 120 degrees. AVR would be minus 150 degrees, AVL would be minus 30 degrees, and AVF would be 90 degrees. Now, coming to how to read the ECG per se. When you want to read the ECG, there are certain things that you should be looking at. First thing is the patient particulars. Whose ECG are you reading? Which patients it is? A lot of mix-ups can happen. So make sure you read the name, the age, the sex of the patient, the date in which the ECG was taken, and the clinical context. All right. So supposing there is a child about say 14 years or 15 years old, and his ECG is presented to me, I will see large complexes in V4, V5, V6. In an otherwise 50-year-old male, I would think that is LVH. But for the child of 15 degrees who has a 15 years, who has a thin chest wall, that may be normal. And similarly, in children, in the neonates and the infants, you would see a right axis deviation, which is normal for them. And but this would be abnormal in an adult. So you need to know what is the age of the patient, what is the sex of the patient, what is the clinical context. Sometimes you see, if the patient comes to you with chest pain and you see small ischemic changes on the precordial leads, you would consider it significant. But if it is just a normal routine ECG, you would probably not consider it significant. So what is the clinical context is also very, very important when you're reading the ECG. Then afterwards, these are the particulars that you should be looking at. What is the rate of the ECG? What is the heart rate, including atrial and ventricular rates? What is the rhythm? These 2 points we will be discussing today. And then we'll go to the axis, the P wave, the PR interval, the QRS itself. Is there any chamber enlargement? Do you see what is happening to the ST segment? Is there any deviation of the ST segment? What is happening to the T wave? And any particular pattern, is it visible on the ECG or not? So if you go systematically in this manner, one by one, looking at the patient particulars, calculating the heart rate, looking at the rhythm, axis, P wave, PR interval, QRS, chambers, ST segment, T waves, and a particular identifiable patterns, then you should be able to read the ECG thoroughly. Coming to the rate, heart rate from the ECG, normal heart rate is about 60 to 100 beats per minute. Less than 60 would be called bradycardia, more than 100 would be called tachycardia. The normal rate is regular, and there is always a P wave present. Before every QRS, the PQRS ratio will be 1:1. And we can calculate the atrial rate separately from the P waves and the ventricular rate separately from the QRS complexes. So how do you calculate the heart rate? What you do is you see the RR intervals. You pick up the consecutive RR interval. Now this is one R wave, this is the other R wave, and you see how many big boxes are there between these RR complexes. So in the first rhythm here, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes. So you divide 300 by the number of big boxes, you get the ventricular rate. So here there are 6 boxes, 300 divided by 6 is 50. Now in the second strip here, you see there are 5 boxes between the consecutive RR. So 300 divided by 5 is 60. Similarly here 300 divided by 4 boxes, which is the heart rate is 75. 300 divided by 3 boxes is 100 ventricular rate. And 300 divided by 2 boxes is 150, and 300 divided by 1 is 300. So this will give you a fair idea what is the heart rate. Now the other method is if you want to count the number of small boxes. Supposing you don't see exactly 4 boxes or 5 boxes, but you see something in between. And so you want to be accurate. So you calculate it as 1500 divided by number of small boxes. Now if you look at this ECG here, now this is the R, this is the R, and in between you have 1, 2, 3, 4 big boxes, and then you have 2 small boxes here and 2 small boxes here. So this is a total of 24 small boxes. So 1500 divided by 24 is 62 per minute. So this is how you calculate the heart rate, and this is the answer to the question that I asked you in the beginning of the webinar. Now, what happens if the rates are irregular? If all these formulae are accurate when the rates are regular? What happens when the patient is in atrial fibrillation, when the rhythm is irregular? So the RR intervals will vary. One RR interval may have 4 boxes, one RR interval may have 5 boxes, one RR interval may have 3 boxes. So the RR intervals vary, and so these formula will not be applicable. So the best method for these patients is to count the number of R waves in a 6-second strip. Now, mind you, I told you each big box is 0.2 seconds. So 5 boxes is equal to 1 second. And so for a 6-second strip, you need 5 into 6, that is 30 boxes. So when you see this strip of 30 boxes and you calculate the number of R waves that are there in this particular strip. So here you see, So here you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The RR interval is irregular, and you see 9 QRS complexes in a 6-second strip. So you multiply it by 10, so the ventricular rate is about 90 here. So this is a rough method, but then this gives us a fair clue about what is the heart rate here. Now, coming to the rhythm of the heart. So first of all, you need to know whether it is a fast rhythm or a slow rhythm. So the fast rhythms are called as tachyarrhythmias, slow rhythms are called as bradyarrhythmias. Then you see whether the rhythm is regular or irregular. Irregular rhythms are sinus rhythm, then other rhythms also, which I'll tell you in the next few slides. Irregular rhythms are where particularly atrial fibrillation, where the RR complexes are very, very irregular, and other the signs where irregular rhythms are there, that also I'll show you. Then you look at the P waves. Are P waves present in the ECG? And you see if all the P waves are looking the same. Supposing the sinus node is a pacemaker of the heart, so whenever the sinus node gives rise to the atrial repolarization, all the P waves should look the same. This will change if there are multiple pacemakers, as in an ectopic atrial tachycardia or a multifocal atrial tachycardia. Then you see if each QRS has a P wave. So each QRS, if it is preceded by a P wave, then you call it a sinus rhythm. Otherwise, the rhythm is probably different. And then you look at the PR interval. So the onset of the P wave to the onset of the QRS, you look at that PR interval. Is the PR interval constant in all the complexes? So whether the PR interval is constant or is it varying? Then you see whether the P waves and QRS complexes are associated with each other. Is there a correlation between the P wave and the QRS, or they're completely off? This is also what we need to see. And then you need to see what is the width of the QRS. Are they narrow or wide? Anything 0.12 millisecond, 0.12 seconds or more is called as wide. So from the beginning of the Q wave to the end of the S wave, you check the width of the QRS. If this is more than 120 milliseconds, it is a wide complex QRS. Then certain arrhythmias, you'll see grouping of QRS. You'll see a few QRS beats coming together, and then there's a pause, then there's a few grouping. So we will come to that also. And then are there any drop beats or missed beats? So you see a continuous rhythm, and then suddenly there is no beat. So all these things you should record. you should look at when you're trying to diagnose a rhythm disorder. Now, the rhythms can be divided into supraventricular and ventricular rhythms. So, the supraventricular rhythms are the rhythms that arise above the ventricles. So, the sinus rhythm, the atrial rhythms, the junctional rhythms, all these are supraventricular rhythms. Ventricular rhythms are different. So, ventricular idiopathic ventricular rhythm, ventricular tachycardia, ventricular fibrillation, these are ventricular rhythms. We'll come to all of these. Now, this is an ECG of a normal sinus rhythm. So, if you look at the ECG here, you see the rate. So how many boxes are there? 1, 2, 3, 4. So 300 divided by 4 is 75. So the rate is between 60 to 100. Yes, it is regular. So this RR is also 4 boxes. This RR is also 4 boxes. This RR is also 4 boxes. So all these are quite similar. So the rhythm is regular. Now, do we see P waves on the ECG? Yes, there are definite P waves. And is the P to QRS ratio 1:1? So each QRS is preceded by a P wave. Similarly here, QRS preceded by a P wave, QRS preceded by a P wave, QRS preceded by a P wave here. So each QRS is preceded by a P wave. So, and then look at the PR interval. So is it normal? So the PR interval is about 3 small boxes, which is about 120 milliseconds, and it is constant in all the complexes. And you will look at the QRS width. Is it less than 120 milliseconds? Yes, it is less than 120 milliseconds. So the QRS width is normal. So when all these criteria are fulfilled, we call this as a normal sinus rhythm. Now let's come to this ECG here. Let's see what is happening. So yeah, always look at the speed of the ECG. So this is 25 millimeter per second. A lot of people can get confused when they don't see the ECG. And if the speeds are not standardized, then the rates and all your calculation will be haywire. So look at the speed of the ECG. Yes, it is 25 millimeter per second. Look at the voltage, 10 mm per millivolt in the limbs, 10 mm per millivolt in the chest. So very good. So this is a normal, standardization is normal here. Now you look at the rate. So here if you look at the rate, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. About 8 boxes you see here. So 300 divided by 8 is how much? It's about 37. So the rate is 37. It is slow. Then do you have P waves? P waves are visible. Yes, there are definite P waves are visible here. And is the P to QRS ratio 1:1? Yes, P to QRS is 1:1. So this QRS preceded by P wave. 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 So, so the rate is less than 60. The rhythm is regular. P waves are present. P to QRS ratio is 1:1. PR interval is normal. QRS width is normal. So this is a case of sinus bradycardia. What are the causes of sinus bradycardia? There are many causes. The most common causes are physiological. Physiological is when the patient is a well-trained athlete, you will see bradycardia. But when these patients start to exercise, the heart rate picks up. Then commonly drugs like beta blockers, calcium channel blockers, and other drugs, hypothyroidism, hypothermia. So there are a lot of other causes of sinus bradycardia. Let's come to this ECG here. All right. So what we see here is, yeah. So is the rate? What is the rate of the ECG here? So this is 5 plus 5, 10, 11, 12, 13. So the rate is definitely greater than 100. So if it's 2 boxes, it is 150. 3 boxes is 100. So between these two, so the rate is between 100 to 150. If you calculate, it will be probably about 125. Is it regular? Yes, the RR intervals. You have to measure these RR intervals. They seem regular. Are there P waves present? Yes, P waves are present. You can see P waves. And is the P to QRS ratio 1:1? Yes, there is a P wave before each QRS, P wave before QRS, P wave before QRS, P wave before QRS. Is the PR interval normal? Yes, the PR interval is also normal. So this is sinus tachycardia. The commonest cause of sinus tachycardia: stress, anxiety, exercise, fever, pregnancy, a lot of the hyperdynamic states as well. Now what is this ECG here? So look at this ECG carefully. Is the rate between 60 to 100? Yes. Is it regular? No. So the first, so if you see the first RR interval, this is about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4.5 boxes. Here this is about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes. Here it is about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 boxes. So the RR interval is varying. Which means the heart rate is varying. And this usual variation is seen with respiration. But what about the P waves? Do we see P waves before each QRS? Yes, there is a P wave before the QRS. There is a P wave before the QRS. There is a P wave before the QRS. There is a P wave here. There is a P wave here. So, and what happens to the PR interval? PR interval is constant here, 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 here. So PR interval is constant here as well. So this is a case of sinus arrhythmia. So with respiration, normally our heart rate changes. And this is more pronounced in children and young adults. Okay, now let's come to this ECG here. So let's see what is happening. Look at the rhythm. Is it regular? No. Now you have a RR interval about 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes here. RR interval about 4 boxes here. RR interval of about 8 boxes here. Then 4, then 4. So it is irregular. So the heart rate is irregular. P wave is present. Yes, it is present before the QRS, before the QRS, before the QRS. And then there was a drop beat here. So there is no P wave. There is no QRS here. And then again, it picks up with P wave and QRS. PQRS ratio, is it 1:1? Yes, it is maintained. Your interval is normal. QRS width is normal. Is there any grouping? No. Is there a drop beat? Yes. So this is a sinoatrial block. Now there is something called a sinoatrial block. Then you have something called as a sinus arrest. How do these two things differ? In sinoatrial block, what you see is where you see the drop beat, the RR interval is exactly a multiple of this RR interval. So here this RR interval you found 4 boxes. Here this RR interval you find 8 boxes. So the duration of the pause with this sinoatrial block or the sinus exit block is a direct multiple of the RR interval of the underlying rhythm. So this is called as a sinoatrial block. Now, if you look at this ECG here, now what is happening here? What is the RR interval here? This is about 3.5 boxes here. This is about 3.5 boxes here. This is about 3.5 boxes here. And then what happens? There's a long pause. How many boxes are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. About 15 boxes. It's not a multiple of this. And again, 3.5 here. So rate is irregular. The P waves are present. P to QRS is 1:1. PR interval is normal. QRS width is normal. The duration of the pause is not a direct multiple of the RR interval. So this is a sinus pause or sinus arrest. Let's go to the next ECG here. Now this ECG here, you'll see. Now this is not a standard 12-lead ECG. This is a rhythm strip that we have taken in V1, V2, and V3. The speed of the ECG is still 25 mm per second. The voltage is normal standard, that is 10 mm per millivolt. So what you're seeing here, the rate is regular. Yes, it is regular. P wave is present. Yes, it is present. But then P waves are negative in V1, V2, and V3. I didn't show the entire ECG. You would actually see negative P waves in L2, L3, AVF as well in this ECG. The P to QRS ratio is 1:1. The PR interval is normal. The QRS width is normal. So this is a rhythm coming in from another site in the atria rather than the SA node. So this is ectopic atrial tachycardia where you see P waves. They are all identical, but they are not of the normal morphology. So the normal morphology of the P wave is they should be upright in the inferior leads. They should be upright in the precordial leads except V1. When you see negative P waves in the inferior leads and negative P waves in the other precordial leads, it indicates the P wave is coming from a site other than the SA node.
So Dr. Aziz, just want to add here. If you just go back to this ECG again, so for the benefit of the audience, because of the medical students. So inferior leads is lead 2, lead 3 AVS. Okay, yes. So lead 2, lead 3 AVS represent the inferior part of the heart, which is the heart which is sitting over the diaphragm. And as Dr. Aziz pointed in V2, if you see focus on the P wave, it's like a flipped P. It's not even like a proper hump. What you see on the road, the hump, it's not there. It's like a, flipped. That means that the rhythm, the axis is actually inferior. So that's what he means by the inferior axis over here. So, flip P waves. Carry on, please, sir.
Yes. So this is a ectopic atrial tachycardia. Now we come to another ECG here. So we go by the steps that we are following. So what is the rate? What is the rhythm? What is the P wave? What is the PR interval? What is the QRS? And so on and so forth. That is how we diagnose rhythm disorders. Now, if you look at this ECG here, the RR intervals are varying. So now here you see the RR interval, 1 box, 2 box, that is 10 millimeter, 12 and plus 2, 12 millimeter here. And here it is 8 millimeter, here it is 10 millimeter, here it is 12 millimeter, here is 80 millimeter. So the RR intervals are varying. So which means the rate is irregular, it's greater than 100. And if you look at the P waves, there are different morphology of the P waves. You look at this P wave, it's a very tall upright P wave. Then the second P wave is a negative P wave. Third P wave is again of a different morphology, tall upright. Then the fourth P wave is a bifid P wave. The fifth P wave is again different. So you see different morphologies of the P wave. So if the P wave has 3 or more morphologies, while maintaining the P to QRS ratio of 1:1. But the PR interval again varies. So the PR interval of this first complex is about 4 small boxes, which is 160 milliseconds. The PR interval of this complex are just 2 small boxes. So the PR interval is varying, and the QRS width is normal. The QRS width is less than 0.12 seconds. So you have a P wave of 3 different morphologies with them while maintaining a P to QRS ratio 1:1 with a varying PR interval. This is called as multifocal atrial tachycardia. So you have different pacemakers arising from the atrium, and these different pacemakers are giving rise to P waves of different morphology. This is usually seen in COPD patients and patients who are on digoxin. Now, if you come to this ECG, what are we seeing here? Is again we go step by step. What is the rate? Now here what we are seeing is we have different atrial rates and different ventricular rates. These are the inferior leads, the L2, L3, AVF. Now here you see one atrial wave here, another atrial wave here. Sorry, where is that? So you have one atrial wave here, the other atrial wave here, another atrial wave here, another atrial wave here. And you see a typical sawtooth pattern of these waves. This one, you see this, if you trace this, it looks like a sawtooth pattern. And these are not called P waves, but these are called as flutter waves. And what is the P to QRS ratio? Now the P to QRS ratio here, it is 2:1. So you have 2 atrial waves and 1 ventricular wave. Again, here also you see 2 atrial waves and 1 ventricular wave. Now this can be 2:1, this can be 3:1, or it can be variable as well. And so the PR interval also varies. This is a classical ECG of a atrial flutter. So not regular P waves, but flutter type of waves with P to QRS 2:1 or 3:1 with a variable PR interval and a typical sawtooth patterns in L3 and AVF. This is called as atrial flutter. Now coming to this ECG here. Now if you look at the ECG here, what is happening to the RR intervals? Now here it is about 4 boxes, here it is about 3 boxes, it's again 4 boxes, 3 boxes, 5 boxes, 2 boxes. So the RR interval is continuously irregular. So it is irregular RR interval. Do we see any clear-cut P waves? No, there are no clear-cut P waves. You may see some fibrillity waves here in V1. Sometimes you see them in the 3 AVF also. So there are no clear-cut P waves. So is there an association with PQRS? If there's no P waves, you cannot see the association. You cannot measure the PR interval. And what is happening to the QRS? QRS width is normal. So irregular QRS complexes with absent P waves. This is typical atrial fibrillation. Now let's come to this ECG. This is a very interesting ECG. Now you look at the ECG QRS complexes in this ECG. So you have QRS complexes here. What is the rate? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So the rate is about 25 to 30. So it is regular. Is it regular? Yes, it is regular. So the RR intervals are constant here, but slow. Are there any P waves? Normally you expect the P wave to be before the QRS, but you see a bump after the QRS here. And you see here also after the QRS, you see a small notch there. So that is the P wave which is hidden inside the, just after the QRS. So what happens to the PR interval in these cases? You cannot calculate sometimes, or else if you calculate, it's actually a negative PR interval. The QRS width is normal. If you look at the width of the QRS, it is about 2 small boxes, which is about 80 milliseconds, so which is normal. So this is a typical junctional rhythm. Now, if you look at this ECG, now it is almost similar to the previous ECG. So you have QRSs, you have QRS which are regular. They're coming at regular intervals. You have a hidden P wave just after the QRS. All right, and these are regular. So you have retrograde P waves. P to QRS ratio is maintained here. So your PR interval is negative, QRS width is normal. But what is the difference between the previous ECG and this ECG? The previous ECG, the heart rate was about 30. Here the heart rate is how much? It's about 60 to 70. So this is an accelerated junctional rhythm. So junctional rhythm by itself, you'll have a rate between 30 to 40. Accelerated junctional rhythm will be more than 60. It's again common in, accelerated junctional rhythm is common in children with congenital heart disease. Now, if you look at this ECG here, this is different from the previous ECGs that we have seen so far. So here we see 3 QRS complexes. The RR interval seems to be equal, but it is very broad. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, almost 10 QRS boxes. So 300 divided by 10 is 30. So then so the heart rate is between 20 to 40. It is regular. There are no P waves. You don't see any P waves here. So there's no PQRS, there's no PR interval. The QRS width now. If you look at the QRS width, it is abnormal. So this is about 4 boxes. So it is about 160 milliseconds, and it is bizarre in morphology. So this arrhythmia, this rhythm is coming from the ventricles. So this is known as the idioventricular rhythm. Now this ECG is similar to the previous ECG. Same thing. The QRS are regular. There's no P wave, so there's no P to QRS ratio. There's no PR interval. The QRS are wide and bizarre. So this is, but the rate is between 40 to 100. So this is accelerated idioventricular rhythm. We can go back to the previous ECG. So here, this is idioventricular rhythm, and this is accelerated idioventricular rhythm. This is a common rhythm that we see after reperfusion in myocardial infarction. And it's usually benign. We just monitor these patients. Now, when that rhythm changes to this rhythm, then we are worried. So here you see the rate is about 150. So this, if you see between these two, it's about 2 big boxes. The ventricular rate is about 150 here. It's regular. The RR intervals are regular. Yes. What about P wave? We don't see any P wave. There might be a P wave somewhere buried in the QRS, maybe here or maybe here. So, and how is the QRS? It's wide and bizarre. So there are multiple QRS beats of regular morphology occurring at a rate of about 150. So this is ventricular tachycardia. Now this I thought I would include, but this is probably a little too much for the MBBS students. We'll skip this slide. Now, so the differential diagnosis comes between VT and via SVT, supraventricular tachycardia. If it has say a right bundle branch block or a left bundle branch block from the beginning, so the QRS would appear wide. So how do you differentiate this ventricular tachycardia and supraventricular tachycardia? These are some of the points. So if you see a rhythm which it is like a VT, you see this rhythm, this is VT, these 4 beats, wide QRS, regular, abnormal, and bizarre, without any P waves. But in the middle of these P waves, you see a sinus beat. So this is called as a capture beat. So in the middle of abnormal wide QRS tachycardia, you see a normal sinus morphology of QRS beat. That's called as a capture beat. And here you see what is called as a fusion beat. So this beat is a mixture of the ventricular beat and the sinus beat. So this is called as a fusion beat. So if you see fusion beats and capture beats, they are more typical of ventricular tachycardia. This I will skip. Now, this is a very important ECG. This is known as Torsades-de-Pointes. So here, this is a form of ventricular tachycardia. The rate is very fast, 200 to 250. It is irregular, no P waves. The QRS width is variable, and the axis keeps changing. So you see a different axis here, a different axis here, and a different axis here. So it's moving up and down. So ventricular tachycardia with a varying axis, it's called as Torsades-de-Pointes. It's a very dangerous ventricular arrhythmia, and it needs to be treated immediately with magnesium and cardioversion. Now, when these rhythms degenerate further, you get ventricular fibrillation. So if you look at this ECG, there are absolutely no identifiable waves, no discernible waves. It's just like a bizarre wave. You don't see any irregularity there. You can't determine the rate. No P wave, QRS is bizarre. You cannot identify any of these waves. This is ventricular fibrillation. So these patients need to be shocked immediately. Okay, now these are the more benign forms of the ventricular arrhythmias. So what we see here is, you see a sinus beat here, a sinus beat. So PQRST, PQRST, PQRST. Then suddenly there is a wave where there is no P wave. The QRS is broad. Now here the QRS is narrow, here the QRS is broad. And the axis of the T wave is negative to the QRS. Here you see the T wave and the QRS are in the same direction. Here you see the QRS is R is positive, whereas the T is negative. So this indicates there's a ventricular premature contraction, or a VPC. And then it is followed by a compensatory pause. You see from here to here, there's a compensatory pause, and then the sinus beat picks up. This is just a ventricular ectopic. A lot of people can have ventricular ectopics without much problem. But when you see this sort of a ECG, then you need to be careful. So here what do you see? You see a sinus beat here, P, QRST. Then again you have a ventricular beat. So the wide QRS, P wave opposite to the QRS, no P wave. Then again you have a sinus beat, PQRST. Then you have a ventricular beat. Then a sinus beat, a ventricular beat. This is called as a ventricular bigeminy. And as you come here, then you see here, after this sinus beat, you have one QRS, which is abnormal, a ventricular premature contraction, and you have another ventricular premature contraction. So you have two ventricular premature contractions following a sinus beat. This is known as a couplet. If you see two VPCs in a row, it's called as a couplet. If you see three VPCs in a row, it's called as a triplet. If you see four VPCs in a row, it's called a non-sustained ventricular tachycardia. Okay, then we come to the other topic, which is AV blocks. Now, to know the AV blocks, you should know what is the PR interval. We were speaking about the PR interval. Normal is between 0.12 to 0.2 seconds, which is 3 to 5 small squares. We can find short PR intervals in Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome, Lon-Ganong-Levin syndrome, and in junctional rhythms where the P wave is very close to the QRS, or on the QRS, or after the QRS. So WPW syndrome, it's a very well-defined syndrome. So you should have a short PR interval, which is less than 0.12 seconds or less than 3 small squares, but with a normal P wave. So you have a normal P wave, but it is very close to the QRS. Then you have a slightly wide QRS complex, and then you have what is called as a delta wave. So there's a notch on the upslope of the QRS. There's a notch on the upslope of the QRS. This is known as a delta wave. And you may have some STT wave changes secondary to this. So this is associated with paroxysmal supraventricular tachycardias. So this is called the WPW syndrome. Then the PR interval can be long as well. So if it is more than 0.2 seconds, it's called as a long PR interval or a first degree AV block. This can be seen in patients who have AV nodal disease, in patients who have enhanced vagal tone, like in athletes, myocarditis, myocardial infarction, especially the inferior myocardial infarction, electrolyte imbalances, or if the patient is on drugs that block at the AV node, like the beta blockers or calcium channel blockers or digoxin. Now, this is an example of the first degree AV block. So here you see, this is the P wave, this is the QRS, and the PR interval is prolonged. Here you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about eight small boxes, which is about 320 seconds, 0.32 seconds. But then you see every QRS is preceded by P wave. So this QRS has a P wave, this QRS has a P wave. And the PR interval, though it is long, it is constant. The same PR interval here, the same PR interval here, the same PR interval here. So this is first degree AV block. This is almost always asymptomatic. And I told you the reasons for these first degree AV blocks as well. Now coming to second degree AV block, you have again two types, Mobitz type 1 and Mobitz type 2. Mobitz type 1 is also called as the Wenckebach phenomenon. So what happens here is, if you look at the ECG, now there is a P wave, QRS, P wave, QRS, P wave, QRS, then there's a P wave. After the PRS, P, there is no QRS here. So there's a dropped beat here. There's a P wave, but no QRS, and then again resumes with the P wave. And if you look at the PR interval, the PR interval is normal in the first beat, then it becomes slightly longer here, then it becomes even longer here, and then there's a drop in the beat. So this is called as a typical Wenckebach phenomenon. So progressive prolongation of the AV conduction and the PR interval until an atrial impulse is completely blocked. Okay, so this is called as a second degree AV block, Mobitz type 1. This is a little benign compared to the one that I'm going to show next. So this is a second degree AV block, also known as the Mobitz type 2 AV block. So here, what do you see here on this ECG? You see one P wave, but there's no QRS. Then there's one P wave. So basically you have two P waves, one QRS. Then there are two normal beats. Then you have again two P waves, one QRS. This PR interval and this PR interval and this PR interval are constant. So you have a fixed conduction 2:1. So this is known as a Mobitz type 2. The Mobitz type 2 is a more dangerous type of AV block. They often may have coexisting fascicular or bundle branch block. Usually the disease is in the below the node. So it is below the bundle of His. So this is a more pathological disease. And this may progress suddenly to a complete heart block. So we'll come to the next slide. So this is what is complete heart block. So what happens in complete heart block? There is a complete absence of AV conduction. The perfusing rhythm is maintained by a junctional or a ventricular escape rhythm. So what you see here, so you see one P wave here, one P wave here, one P wave here, one P wave here. Then you see QRS is here. Now these PP intervals are constant. If you calculate this P to P interval, 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 this is constant. And there's a superimposed P wave on this T wave. The RR intervals are constant, but the PR intervals, they'll vary. So if you see, look at this PR interval, look at this PR interval, look at this PR interval, they'll vary. So regular PP intervals, regular RR intervals, but variable PR intervals, no association between the P wave and the QRS. This is called as a third degree AV block. And here you see the rhythm, the escape rhythm is broad, complex, and slow. So this is a ventricular escape rhythm. These are dangerous arrhythmias. These patients can have dizziness, they can have syncope. Also, I would like to talk about AV dissociation. So AV dissociation is wherein there is no association between the atrial waves and the ventricular waves. So this can be the passive type, which I showed you, the escape rhythm, which is in third degree AV block, or sometimes active type, which is an accelerated idioventricular rhythm or ventricular tachycardia, where there's no association between the A wave and the P wave. So I think we will stop here, and these are the topics we will discuss in another class. It's already been 1 hour.
Thank you, Dr. Aziz. That was a very thorough and detailed talk. Some of the questions we came up is, can you go and explain about the rate and rhythm again, if you don't mind, just for the benefit of the medical students.
So one question is, can you explain the calculation of heart rate when the rhythm is irregular? So I showed this, I'll come back to this again. So if you can see my screen. So when the rate is irregular, so all that you need to do is you count the number of R waves, in a 6-second cycle. And then you multiply it with 10. So you get the rate. Here, like I showed you. Now you have to count 6 seconds. So every 5 boxes is 1 second. So 30 boxes is 6 seconds. And you see the number of R waves in this QRS and you multiply it by 10. So that is how you get the rate in irregular rhythms. Now, some question about the QRS width here. So the QRS width normally is between 0.08 to 0.12 milliseconds. Anything 0.12 milliseconds or higher is called as a wide QRS. Wide QRS is you can get in bundle branch blocks like a left bundle branch block or right bundle branch block or in ventricular rhythms. Another question is difference between sinus arrhythmia and sinus tachycardia. So sinus tachycardia is a regular rhythm. The rate is higher, maybe 110, 120, so anything more than 100, but it is regular. In sinus arrhythmia, the rhythm changes with respiration. So when you take a deep inspiration, your heart rate varies. So the RR interval is irregular, and this is usually seen in younger adults. Somebody wanted to know about flutter waves. Okay, let's see all this. So there are questions about flutter waves, second degree AV blocks, and fascicular blocks. Fascicular blocks I'll show in the next session. So flutter waves, I'll come down to the flutter waves. So flutter waves, atrial flutter, if you see waves which do not fit into a particular morphology of the P wave, and if you see multiple waves there, now here you see. So if you look at this L3 here, you see one atrial wave here, another atrial wave is here. Sorry. So there's one atrial wave here, another atrial wave here, then one atrial wave here, another atrial wave here. So you have two atrial waves and one QRS wave. So there's a 2:1 conduction of these flutter waves. And if you look at the pattern, if you trace it, this looks like a sawtooth, like a wavy sawtooth. This is called as flutter wave. And there was another question about second degree AV block. I'll come to that. Second degree AV block is basically two types, Mobitz type 1, Mobitz type 2. Mobitz type 1 is not the dangerous one. Mobitz type 2 is the more dangerous one. So let me come to this. Yeah, so Mobitz type 1, what is happening is there is one P wave, then QRS, then P wave, QRS, P wave, QRS, then as a P wave, but after that there's a drop in the beat. But if you look at the PR interval, the PR interval is normal here. The PR interval broadens in the next QRS beat, it becomes even longer in the next QRS beat, then there is a drop in beat. And then again, it resumes with the normal PR interval. So this cycle goes on. So normal PR interval, long PR interval, longer PR interval, drop in beat. Then again, normal PR interval, long PR interval, longer PR interval, drop in beat. So this is Mobitz type 1 or Wenckebach. Mobitz type 2, there's a fixed block. You have two P waves, one QRS, two P waves, one QRS, two P waves, one QRS, or sometimes three P waves, one QRS, three P waves, one QRS. That is called as a Mobitz type 2 or a second degree AV block.
I think it's important point which Dr. Aziz have alluded in the earlier slides is that always match the ECG with the patient. Always is very important. I've seen disasters been happen in various hospitals, even in England, where they treat the patient for a different ECG. The patient ECG is different. You don't match the patient and the ECG. So disasters happen. Always important that always match or ask person who is taking the ECG to write the patient's name, file number, date of birth, anything which matches the patient. It's like a passport for the patient. So because in acute takes, you have busy takes, you have like 10 patients to look after in one shift and you don't know whose ECG is what. So if the patient doesn't have, ECG doesn't have a name written on it, discard it. Do not assume that, it's the same patient's ECG. If in doubt, repeat the ECG. It doesn't take more than 5 minutes to repeat the ECG. Always start with basics, as Dr. Aziz has mentioned. Rate, rhythm, axis, hypertrophy, and then you keep moving on. So start with basics like rate, how to calculate the rate, 300 by number of big squares or 1500 by number of small squares. If you have irregular rhythm and rhythm, I think Dr. Aziz has already gone in very detailed. He has actually broken down in very, very simple way so that you guys can learn and keep going and back at it, keep repeating it. The thing with ECGs is that the more ECGs you keep reading, the expert you become. So you get in a habit of picking ECGs randomly, get some ECG books, start calculating your rates, rhythm from at your level, at intern level or medical students level. Keep reading as many ECGs as possible. So the more you see, the more you get expert at it. In the future webinars, we will try to cover the advanced ECG interpretations, how to manage these tachycardias, what to do with bradycardias, when not to intervene, when to intervene, and what are the various causes and how to tackle these issues. There's a lot of basic questions coming up. So I think there has been a few questions asking like, can you post this talk on the somewhere? So what I have done is that I have recorded this webinar, and we'll do a bit of editing and we'll post it on a YouTube link soon, maybe in a week's time, for the benefit of everyone. I hope Dr. Aziz, you happy with this for this talk to be posted on the YouTube.
Right. So there are a couple of quick questions. I will answer them. So the question is, which lead should we always read in most conditions? For rhythm diagnosis, the leads best are lead 2 and V1. So lead 2 and V1, these show the P waves, the PR interval in detail. And so these are the leads that you should be focusing on when you're looking at the rhythm per se. Other leads are important for ischemia, infarction, see which part of the heart is involved in all those things. Other things I think we've already explained. There's a question about difference between junctional rhythm and AIVR. So junctional rhythm is arising just beneath the AV node. AIVR is arising from the ventricular muscle cells themselves. So AIVR is a broad rhythm. So the QRS is broad, more than 120 milliseconds, and it is slower, maybe 30 to 40. Junctional rhythms are slightly faster, between 40 to 60, and they are narrow QRS. So I think, sir, we'll close this question.
We can stop. Yes, I think thank you very much. And you had a very good attendance, almost 165 to 170 attendees managed to. That means people were very keen and to learn about ECGs. Alhamdulillah, I think our efforts are reaching the people who need it most. Thank you very much. I think we can stop the webinar here.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you all for attending. Inshallah, we'll meet up in a follow-up to this session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.